21st century hasn't started well for Peugeot. Since the 306 GTI disappeared in 2001, they haven't produced a single desirable car. Finally though, things are looking up. Their new 3008 crossover is superb, their 5008 MPV is incredibly good, and now they've produced this. The stunning RCZ. Unlike beautiful Peugeots of the past, the RCZ is styled in-house instead of by Pininfarina, but it doesn't suffer for it. The double bubble roof, aluminium swoops and ready-to-pounce shoulders make it look muscular but not overly butch. Feline but not too feminine. It's a wonder bra next to the Audi TT's trouser suit. It's been nearly a decade since Peugeot last made a car that was actually good to drive, so this RCZ has got a lot of making up to do. And this 25 grand top of the range GT model will show it off in the best possible light. It might only have a 1.6 litre petrol engine, but it's been turboed up to 200 brake horsepower, meaning 0 to 62 in 7.5 seconds. It's basically the same unit as you'd find in the Mini Cooper S, but in the RCZ it doesn't feel quite as peaky or quite as barky in its power delivery. You could probably argue that that makes it less sporty and therefore the RCZ's not as exciting. But to be honest, it works quite well. You can choose to drive around quietly, relaxed, enjoying the double bubble roof and all the sunshine, or if you really want to give it some beans, above 4,000 RPM it really picks up, and if you listen, it sounds really, really good. There's a little membrane in the dashboard that amplifies the engine noise into the cabin so that when you want to hear the engine, you do, and it sounds good, but when you want to just cruise, it disappears, and it's as quiet as any other 1.6 engine would be. There's also a 156 brake horsepower version of the 1.6 for a smidge over 20 grand, and a 163 brake horsepower diesel version, which will manage 53 miles per gallon, around 10 more than the petrols. But radically for a Peugeot, it's not the diesel version you want. It's the petrol one, because instead of driving this Peugeot to eke out as many miles per gallon as possible, it's a Peugeot you drive for pleasure. I haven't said that in a while. The front-wheel drive chassis is basically the same as the one you'd find in the 308 hatchback, but don't get too disappointed. It's a couple of inches wider in the track, it's 40mm lower down, and everything feels like it's been tightened up. All of the rubber bushes feel like they're a little bit tighter, the springs feel firmer, it's dartier, it's better on the turning. It's not got amazing steering feel, but it feels enjoyable. It's a nice, satisfying car to drive. But what about its similarly sporty sounding rivals, I hear you say? Well, first up, I guess, the slightly more expensive Audi TT. That's never been particularly good to drive anyway, and while the RCZ might not feel quite as firm, I'd say it's actually better to drive. It's more fluid, it's got more of a rhythm, it's more satisfying. But that's not the only rival. Volkswagen Scirocco. It's cheaper than the TT, which means it's the same price as the RCZ, and it feels snugger, it feels more snicky, it feels more like a sports car. Neither of them are exactly Porsche Boxsters, but if I had to choose between driving the Peugeot and driving the Volkswagen, I'd have to take the Scirocco. So it's not the last word in scalpel sharp dynamics, but not everybody cares. It's got stunning looks, good fuel economy, a strong engine. However, it is still French, so the interior could still be made of rice paper. Like the chassis, it shares a lot with the 308 hatch, so you get a tidy design and smart materials, as well as some shiny chrome flourishes just for the RCZ. And an analogue clock. It's not as special as the outside, but you'd say the same about a Scirocco. And the boots are decent size too, especially when you fold away the tiny rear seats. It's not as impractical as it looks. So overall, it's an incredibly well thought out car. A smart balance of styling and practicality, handling and ride, performance and economy. Fans of Peugeot greats like the 205 GTI will argue that such compromises are a bad thing, but the days of lightweight buzz boxes engineered to handle brilliantly above all else are over, and the RCZ is a worthy evolution.